Welcome to r/PettyRevenge, where we share stories of small victories over those who have wronged you. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. And the first story is Revenge on Loud Partying College Students, featuring my dad and dog. This occurred in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was in grade school. I grew up on a street that was mostly old houses from the 1910s, and most of them were huge. Like built originally as single-family homes, but massive enough to turn into apartments or studios. Which is what a lot of landlords did, to make a decent profit off of the kids who went to the college about 6 blocks up the street. I think typically 6 to 8 kids shared one house. One such house was directly next door, and another was down and across the street. There was a lot of turnover in these houses, as you can imagine, and it always stressed my mom and dad out to see new kids moving in. As an adult, I now understand why. A few times we had some really chill, nice kids living next door, and a few times we had total a-holes living there. One year it was a-holes. They were hard party types who didn't care if it was the middle of the week or the middle of the night to throw an insanely loud, rowdy house party. And when I say loud, I mean that even with our houses being separated by a large yard, we could still hear their bass thumping from inside our house, sometimes until 3 in the morning. Now, my dad is one of the most laid-back and passive people I know. He always started by going next door himself to ask them to kindly keep it down. This particular crowd basically blew him off, and if I recall, had a few colorful words for him. Okay, fine. Police were called. The policy at the time, if I recall correctly, was if the police were called 3 separate times, over the same house, a complaint was launched automatically. These kids literally did not care. The complaint happened, and I assume the landlord gave them mild SH for it. They quieted down for maybe a week or two, and started back up again. I don't know how they didn't get evicted, other than the landlord cared more about money than keeping the peace in the neighborhood. And to add to it all, the partygoers would lob all their trash over the fence into our yard. This includes glass, which broke often. Once there were broken beer bottles right under where my swing was. Needless to say, my parents were not happy. If either parent confronted these teas, they would be rude and unpleasant. My mom began picking up their trash and throwing it back into their yard, for what good that did. The morning after one particularly loud party, I was out in the yard with my mom and our dogs. One of the dogs was a hound. This information will be relevant shortly. I think my mom was picking up some of the trash. It was mid-morning, and the party people were next door sleeping off their hangovers. I had the idea of bringing one of my many pets out in its cage. Honestly, can't remember which one. I had a plethora of hamsters, guinea pigs, and rabbits growing up. I would sometimes take the bottom off of the cages and let the critter enjoy the grass for a bit. I did this not thinking about our high-prey drive hound being outside at the time. He got really worked up upon seeing a small animal. He started baying, loudly. Now I'm thinking, OSH, the dog is making noise. Gonna take the critter back inside. My mom glanced over, saw what was going on, and said something along the lines of, "Leave the critter out here for a bit." So I kept it out of reach of the hound, who had to be on a long rope, as he would bolt and run off, and just sat there for a minute watching him incessantly bay over and over, before it dawned on me what my mom was doing. Mind you, we were as close to this other house as we could be without going over the fence. These hungover people were getting a rude awakening. Plus, this was one night we had called cops. They were going to have to deal with the complaint, and their landlord when they got up. Mom continued throwing trash over the fence back into their yard. Dog bayed. Critter didn't care. Critter was safe under his cage and happily snacking on the grass. I doubt any of the other neighbors would have cared, as we knew most of them and they would have been dealing with the same noise we had for months. No one from the house ever came out, but I know that dog made enough racket to wake them all up, hopefully feeling like crap. That was the last rowdy party that house had until the end of the semester. I didn't find out about this next bit until I was well into adulthood. Part 2 of this revenge includes my dad, who to his credit always tried to deal with these people civilly. The victims of his revenge were in the house down the street. They were so loud that half a block away, we could still hear the music and yelling. Except these people were meaner. They got really crazy, and sometimes the parties got violent. When my dad went to ask them to lower the noise level, they said not just nasty but threatening things to him. Same complaints to the cops, same BS. After they kept us awake for the dozenth time, my dad went over to their absolutely trashed yard after dark. With him, he had a crock pot of chili that had been neglected in the fridge for far too long. My dad said it smelled and looked like vomit. And lo, there was the motorcycle of one of the a-holes, parked in the front yard uncovered. My dad liberated the rotten chili onto said bike. He told me he peeked out the window a few times, and actually got to witness the glorious moment the bike owner came upon his defiled cycle. The guy apparently put his hand in this stuff, and then proceeded to puke all over the lawn. I'm sure he thought someone else had been sick on the bike. No one ever cleaned off the bike either. It sat in the yard until it was nothing but rust. I still consider my dad to be one of the most passive human beings on this earth, but it shows that everyone has their limits. Fortunately, afterwards, both houses had decent kids every year until we moved away from that house. The second story is Skid on my lawn and harass my family? Hope your job security is good. I've known the people that committed these actions for quite a while. Some of them were good friends, some I had no beef with at all. Then they went rogue for no apparent reason. Anyway, this happened a month ago, and it progressed ever since. My family and I live in a rather quiet neighborhood and like to mind our business. There are a few selfish individuals who live in my town who enjoy to harass people, do drugs, and generally get up to no good. The main ringleader is a person I went to school with. He left a few years ago to go to a military school for whatever reason I wouldn't know. Let's call him Degenerate. One Saturday night after midnight, Degenerate and his friends decided it'd be funny to get in his car, drive out to my place, and do skids on our front lawn by the road. I noticed these marks the next morning when I'm walking to the bus, and Degenerate is the first person that comes to mind when I think about who could have done it. Later that day, I sent him a message via social media, asking if he knew anything about it. He replied with, "Nah man, I don't have my car, it's getting fixed." "Alright, whatever, I'll believe you." The next night he comes back again. This time my lawn is absolutely torn to pieces. Having a lot of rain within the days previous, they're deep too. I was boiling with anger at this point. Later that evening, at 5:15 p.m., this time will mean something later on, I was walking down the road with one of my friends, and Degenerate drives past with 3 to 4 other males in his car. I recognized at least one person in the car who had been a friend of mine until he got into drugs and completely went off the rails. Now here's where the time that I saw him becomes relevant. I send him a message on the Tuesday asking if he was involved in it. He denies it again, his reason being that he had taken his car to get the back windscreen replaced at 5:15 p.m. on the Monday. The glass repair shop closes at 5 p.m., and why would he be going there to get it fixed with 3 to 4 other people? It didn't add up. By then I had proved that he had his car on Monday night and he was lying. As for the Sunday night car possession, he then said he did have it on Sunday night. Either way, I proved to him that he did have his car both nights. As I later found out, he had come to my school on Monday and was bragging to my friends about how he did the skids on my lawn and that he wanted me to find out by myself. Degenerate is too R to figure out that they're gonna come straight to me. Fast forward roughly 3 weeks down the track, and I'm at a party and Degenerate's there. He comes up to me and says, "Oi, OP, how are the skids on your lawn?" while breathing smoke from his blunt in my face. This all died down for a couple of weeks, until a week ago they came again, but with another truck with mud tires. My parents heard it happening, but didn't think it was them doing skids on our lawn. Lawn took a pretty good beating that night, and there were feces from either a dog or a human that appeared there on the same night. My father had already contacted the police after the first set, but they said they couldn't do anything. They were contacted again, and we have number plates and names, etc. They said they would go and visit them on the Monday. Fast forward to a couple of days ago, and my parents received a letter anonymously accusing my father of having an affair with the writer's mother. Infuriated, Dad goes to the police again, and they open a police file and make a note of harassment. Degenerate is also a known drug dealer, so he tells them that too. So in his police file there are notes for harassment and that he could be a drug dealer. I know he is for sure, but the police can't do anything about it yet. The revenge is just getting started. I suggested that we should go to his employer, who hired him about 2 weeks ago. Father rings up Degenerate's employer and chats with them and details what Degenerate has been doing to my family. Employer is thoroughly disgusted and wants to have a meeting in person with my dad. This meeting was with the big boss and branch manager. Yesterday, Degenerate got sent home from work, and after today's meeting, the managers are seriously peeved off and are going to sort him out. Since he's on a 90-day trial, he could lose his job. But if that happens, I'll actually gather evidence that he's a drug dealer, and his house will get raided. Degenerate is also a keen outdoorsman, but with the police file he's acquired with his actions, this means he'll never be able to get a gun license, or get a job where you get a police check. Any job that has security involved. This revenge isn't finished just yet, but he is pretty effed already, and it's been very satisfying. And the last story is, she called me a bee, in my own home no less. I used to manage a convenience store and we hired this woman. Let's call her Evil W, or EW for short. EW looked good on paper, but she was not a nice person. EW worked mornings with a lady I will call Anne. Anne's son John worked afternoons with me. One day John told his mom something rather surprising, and his mom, shocked, confided in EW. By the end of the week, EW had outed John to the rest of the staff and embellished how Anne found out, to include her walking in on John and another guy. Fortunately, the staff loved John and rallied around him, but what a nasty thing to do. In addition to being a bee, EW was also an alcoholic. One time she brought her 6-year-old son to work, where he spent the balance of the day whining that he wanted a lemon drop. Finally, a coworker bought a bag of lemon drops for the kid, who informed her that she must be stupid, because a lemon drop is vodka, lemon juice, and sugar. Anyway, although things started out alright, eventually it got to the point where, if we scheduled EW to work on a Monday morning, she failed to show up a full 50% of the time. It had been about 6 months since we hired her, which coincidentally was how long she needed to work before being eligible for unemployment benefits again, when we stopped scheduling her for the 6 to 2 shifts on Monday. We gave her the 11 to 3 instead, which obviously resulted in her losing some hours. EW did not like that. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was at home when my phone rang. It was EW, drunk and yelling at me about her hours. She called me a stupid bee a few times and kept repeating a simple mantra: fire me, fire me, fire me. So I eventually hung up and I called my boss and told her what happened. We talked a bit and decided EW is more trouble than she was worth. So I called her back and said, "I've thought it over, EW, and I've decided to take your advice and fire you. Goodbye." But that isn't the revenge bit. The revenge is when she filed for unemployment. I know a bit about how bureaucrats work, so I decided she wouldn't be getting unemployment benefits this time around. We contested her claim and gave the unemployment office my contact information. When they called, they asked me why I'd let her go. It went something like this: "Unemployment guy. EW says you cut her hours. Can you explain why that happened?" Me: "Well, EW does a good job when she's there, but unfortunately I think he has an alcohol problem. She hasn't been dependable on Monday mornings, so we decided to let her sleep in." UG: "But she was a good employee other than that?" Me: "Yes and no. She's good at the work, but she outed a gay coworker to the whole company last month. And the last straw was when she called me at my home and started swearing at me. She called me a bee while I was in my own home. I don't have to put up with that. I was in my living room, and she's yelling at me saying, 'Fire me, you stupid bee,' and I'm not going to be called a bee in my own home." UG: "Wait, she asked you to fire her?" Me: "Yeah, while calling me a bee, in my own home no less." UG: "But she said the words, 'fire me.'" Me: "Over and over again. But I seriously don't need to be called a bee in my own home." UG: "But she asked to be fired." Okay, I think you've answered my questions. Thank you. I hung up with a huge grin on my face. It was a week or two before the letter from unemployment came. EW was denied and would have to get a job. Boo effing who. Thank you for watching. Bye.